Well, I have Dr. Jeremy Weisz on today's podcast, and you're going to want to listen to him because he started podcasting and in the podcast industry before people even were aware that it was a thing. He runs Rise25. He's a co-founder of the agency, and they help B2B businesses connect to their Dream 100 clients, referral partners, and get ROI using just a podcast. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's an honor and pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I read that you started with Mixergy, right? Which I actually was aware of, 10 years ago? They were in the business of podcasting and
longer. Yeah.
Yeah, teleconferencing. Weren't they? That's where they got their start?
Even longer than that. Yeah.
Wow.
He's Andrew. I think I met Andrew in 2008. And he had been podcasting, I think, even since going back further, like 2006 or 5. Even.
Wow. How'd you get started with him? And then how'd you find yourself running an agency and helping people do what you do now?
Yeah, I mean, I have I guess you could say, strange background considering what I do, but in biochemistry, and my background's in biochemistry and as a chiropractor. And so back then I used to love to go, if you are anyone who runs any business, dental office, chiropractic office, you have to learn everything, right? You have to learn marketing, you have to learn absolutely everything, not just your craft. So I was going to lots of conferences, and I love being around, as I know you do, like-minded entrepreneurs, founders. We are both in the Jason Swank group together. And, it was early on that I was just talking to some of these people who are doing just cutting edge stuff in digital marketing back in 2006, 7, 8. And so I was seeing a lot of the stuff that now has become more popular. But back then it was not as common. And one of those things was doing podcasts. And most people in that time period didn't know what a podcast was or not heard of a podcast. Now it's obviously become more popularized. So I started doing podcasting over 10 years ago. And so people just kept asking me, hey, can you help me? Can you help me? You know what you're doing. And so over time, I just started helping more and more business owners. And there are all sorts of business owners, from radiology clinics to dental offices to pest control businesses to agencies to whatever, who wanted to start a podcast. And I mean, there's so many reasons why to start a podcast, but that's why I got into it originally.
So you have been quoted as saying every business should have a podcast. Every business.
Yeah.
Even ones that aren't so-called marketing sexy or are considered a boring industry. What are some examples that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that every business should have a podcast, just like a business has a website, they should have a podcast. And I'm happy to spitball one with you. If you think of like an industry, like how would XYZ industry, if one comes to mind, I can spitball
insurance, health insurance. Yeah.
Yeah. It's there's actually someone like down the street from my chiropractic office that's what he does. He does health insurance for people. And so my question is, for him, I look at it in a couple fronts. One, producing great content is thought leadership. So, if you are in health insurance, you can be talking about why, Medicare Plan B, you should look at or you should consider a Blue Cross HMO versus Aetna. So you just become the thought leader in your space and do really specific content around those topics. And so that's one type of piece of content someone can be producing, which is in any business. They have a thought leadership. And I kind of talk about this, Pia, which is I believe there's 5 different types of episodes people should be creating. One of them would be their thought leadership. So in any business, we want to be the authority in our space. And so talking about that. For a health insurance too, my question is where do people get referrals? He probably gets referrals. If he gets a company in the area, that may mean switching a plan of 50 people or 100 people. So I would love to talk and network with people in my local community. Let's say, in Chicago, there's big, Walgreens is in the Chicagoland area. There's lots of companies. So if his sweet spot is companies that are 50 to 500 people, well, I would probably get to meet these people and tell their story on my podcast. So really networking and learning from other people in the community and raising them up on the podcast. So if any business can do that, they have thought leadership, they have people that send them referrals. They could even profile clients who said, listen, before I had zero insurance, I broke my leg and I had to pay $10,000. And then, I got this insurance and I got injured and I paid a $20 copay. So they could probably anyone can profile their current or past clients on the podcast too. So those are just kind of a few examples that would apply to any business.
Yeah. So you mentioned interviewing your clients, which I took you up on that advice, and I'm going to be scheduling 4 different interviews. One of them is with a neuroscientist.
Nice.
Who started a sleep therapy business online, and just kind of how she went from, traditional medicine to now telemedicine, and how she's marketing it. So great points. So I'm sure you get this a lot, but clients come to you and they always say, yes, I know I need a podcast someday. And what do you say to them, Jeremy?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason is I tell people you can use the podcast for whatever your biggest initiatives are for your business. So I think people say someday because they're maybe thinking it in a different bucket than how they should be thinking of it, right? So a podcast is a Swiss Army knife, right? So it could be business development, it could be content, it could be sales, it could be hiring, it could be research. So if that person says someday, I'll be like, well, why someday? What are you focused on right now? And if they go, well, like I had this conversation the other week, PNs, I go, and they are a client, so they were just lagging behind on their episodes. Like, hey, what's happening? You were so excited. You were having your, we were doing thought leadership with them. They were doing, having some of their clients on. They're like, we're just so busy. We just are hiring, And I go, perfect. Where are you getting your hires from? Right. And like, well, there's like some colleges in the area that are referring. I'm like, so why aren't you interviewing the heads of those departments at colleges to get a pipeline of hires for your company? Like, oh, I wasn't thinking of it like that. So yeah, I would say if someone's like, well, I will do it, but later, I would wonder how can it serve the biggest need or biggest goal that you have right now in your company? Because I believe it can serve that need or goal. I mean, even if it's for training, let's say, well, we're onboarding a bunch of staff. Well, you can create a bunch of episodes to train your staff, and then other people can listen to it, and then your staff can listen to it too.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Every day I'm learning, excuse me, more ways to use my episodes. I've been using it in business development. So, a prospect will have a discovery call and they'll say, well, I just don't know about, local SEO or whatever the topic is. And I will send them an interview specifically about it. And totally. Of course, definitely authority building, right? And you're creating that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, I find if someone recognizes that they're repeating the same thing over and over every week, well, then that's perfect. Like you said, like I don't know how many times a week tell people, whether it's a client or someone who's wondering about starting a podcast, about these are the 5 types of episodes you should create. Well, John Corcoran, my business partner, and I created an episode on that because you only have so much time on the phone with someone. Just like if someone's asking you, how can I improve my SEO? Well, okay, let me summarize like over a decade of experience in like 5 minutes. It's hard to do that, but you can give them some information, but say, here, I created this other episode that goes more in depth with it.
Yeah. And it seems to be that audio reaches the certain parts of the brain and creates that emotional connection from what I've researched. What do you mean by helping your clients get their dream 100? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, if you're out there and you haven't done this exercise, we probably do this exercise every, 4 months or so, where we think about who are the people in your network you really just want to give to. And people will oftentimes think of, I was doing a webinar the other week and someone asked this question, about the Dream 100, and most people visualize the Dream 100 being your ideal clients, right?
Right.
So
that's what I thought.
A Dream 100 list of who are the absolute amazing people or companies that you want to work with, which is a great exercise to do. But the way I was explaining the Dream 100, in addition, and I didn't come up with the term the Dream 100. There's other people. I think Chet Holmes came up with the Dream 100, or someone else before him. But I think of it not just of clients, but referral partners. So referral partners. So if you make a Dream 100 list of your referral partners, that's even more highly leveraged than a Dream 100 that are just clients, right? Yeah. Because one of those referral partners can refer you over and over again, right? Yeah. So I think of the Dream 100 is referral, strategic partners, and clients.
That's fantastic. I know that I'm interviewing a few referral partners as well, and I'm also referring them by sharing their podcast episodes. So
totally
showing their authority. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's a great point. I love, I probably make 5 to 30 introductions every single day. And in that message, it's just easy, like, hey, here's what they're about. And it's just summed up of what they do. So I love that you do that too.
So let's talk about some of the mistakes that you're seeing that people are making. I know one of them is probably inconsistency, right?
Yes. There's a bunch out there, and no clear strategy is the biggest one. And I think the consistency thing comes up because there's no clear strategy. So someone may do it for a while and say, after whatever, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, a year, 2 years, say, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of energy. Am I really getting a lot out of it? And the answer may be no, but the answer may be back up into, well, what was the strategy? It's like same thing as if you help someone with their website or SEO and they have a terrible strategy from the get-go, well, it's not going to be successful, and then they're going to quit. They're like, it's not working. Yeah. So I think, the way I think of a strategy, having the correct strategy is the most important piece, which kind of goes back into what you were asking before, which was a great question, which is create your Dream 100, reach out to people, focus on creating amazing content, and then continue to give to your audience and your guest by posting it everywhere, putting it on in email, on social media, and forming a real relationship with your viewers or with your guests. So, but let's say, assume the strategy is in place, okay, for a second. So what do big mistakes they make? Well, it kind of all goes back to strategy when I think about it, because people are like, well, and when I talk about podcasts, PLA, I am talking more on the B2B podcast front, because if someone's starting a true crime podcast, I am absolutely not the expert in that at all. So that is not something I have knowledge of. That's more of like audience growth, right? Yeah. And it's a totally different metric. Yeah. And so the other thing is, it is inconsistent. But I feel like if people have it serve their biggest initiative, they will be consistent with it, because people get busy in their business. So like, well, I don't have time. Well, I'm thinking, well, you don't have time to talk to your best clients and referral partners. Right. That of course we do when you think of it like that. Or, well, I'm hiring. Well, do you have time to talk to the people who can send you like maybe 10 amazing hires? So if it serves the need of the business, it will be consistent. I think that is the core issue, of not having the strategy.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is it's just the mindset, right? Everyone is all about the downloads and growing your audience and how can you find sponsors, and that's really not where the ROI is. At least not initially. It's developing those relationships.
Yeah, that's the number one biggest problem. The number two is people trying to do it all themselves. We think of, when we get into business, we're doing everything ourselves. I don't care who it is. You should be getting this stuff off of your plate. So you're showing up and doing the highest leverage task. You are building the relationship and running your business. I was talking to someone the other day and they're like, well, I love doing the audio editing. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you about that. I go, I don't, but if you do, you need to change your mindset, because is it more important for you to run your business or for you to be doing audio? That's not what their skill set is, right? I mean, if they were an audio editor, that's a different story, but that's not what their business is. So I go, you need to get it out of your mind. Whoever does it shouldn't be you. So getting everything out, delegating everything else off of your plate, and having the right strategy are the two biggest things.
Yeah. And that's what you help your clients with as well. So soup to nuts, right?
I mean, I built it for myself, Pia. I mean, this is like, I wanted to show up, do the interview, build the relationship, and run the business. I did not want to do everything else. So yeah, we help with the strategy piece. And then for people who is a fit for us, then we will, take 99% of the work off of their plate.
And you walk the talk too, because you're very generous with your time and coaching and helping. And I know it comes around, what you give out. So thank you for your help you've given us. And thank you because we're in the same agency mastermind, and it's amazing to have that support. I want to switch to talking about search engine optimization. I read somewhere that Google is now going to be ranking podcasts higher. What do you know about that? And have you seen that coming up as well?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll do this caveat. I am not a search engine optimization expert, but I never really focused on the SEO perspective of it. But let me tell you this, there's people who I've had, I remember like 6 months ago, and when you search their name on Google, I am 3 search results on the first page of Google for their name, right? So I am ranking big time for other people's names and other people's companies' names, because I've had them on the podcast. And these are some of these companies, they've been around for decades. So I think I focus more on the person and the company, but I mean, Google, everyone's getting into Amazon podcast, Google podcast. So also on the SEO front, I also have been doing video for 10 plus years. So obviously Google owns YouTube. So that is also ranking as well. So on the first page for this person's name was a link from Inspired Insider, my episode with this person. It was the video from YouTube was on there. And there were like 1 or 2 podcast channels, like Apple iTunes or Spotify, on all the first page of Google. So I think from an SEO perspective, like, you would probably have way more knowledge. I mean, if you really wanted to research what are keywords that people are searching for, you could probably go deep in actually being more strategic with SEO, which I am not as much. But there is huge ranking opportunity, no doubt. And I haven't even tried, really. I haven't even thought of it. So someone like you has more knowledge in that front would kill it even more.
Yeah, well, there's definite rankings to be considered for audio, especially if you're doing transcripts. I was researching for Marcus Sheridan's interview a couple weeks ago, and I came across one of our fellow friends, Jack Justice. He did an interview on video, and he had 5 videos pop up on the first page, and they were just one interview in chapters, and it was stunning. It was like, here's Marcus Sheridan, the godfather of marketing, right? And my friend pops up for his podcast interview with Marcus Sheridan. So yeah, there's definitely some value.
The power of YouTube, and like you said, transcripts. So like sometimes early on, people say, Jeremy, I want to do it, and it becomes like a cost thing. I say, if you are long-term SEO, then yes, do transcripts. If that is cost prohibitive, or if it's going to increase the budget in the beginning, then don't worry about it, right? So, but it depends on what the strategy is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned video. I'm doing video as well in this interview. And I just feel like it just gives me more assets, marketing pieces to repurpose out there. Are there any other benefits that you see to video? to add that to your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, the two benefits I see to video are, I mean, that is obviously one of them, which is just more places to put it, but it's also just more personal because there's a different experience with someone watching us and like seeing us, and you get a greater connection with someone. You mentioned the audio, like it probably goes to a certain part of the brain. Well, if you're in video, it's more personal. So if they're like, oh, I could hear Pia, but what does she actually look like? That trust is built more in depth when they see you and hear you. So just from that standpoint alone, I think it's worth doing video. I mean, there's a lot of benefits with the SEO and all, because it's going on different platforms, but the personal part and the trust part is huge also.
What are some of the ideas that you've seen that are pretty, so there's standard ways of taking your content from your podcast episodes and then repurposing them. Things like audio clips and pull quotes and so forth. What are some other creative ways that you've seen people market their episodes?
Yeah, I mean, so I like to keep it simple. When you do an episode, what's great about a podcast is you can distribute it across 10 plus platforms. So you can distribute on all the podcast platforms, obviously, in YouTube. And so from the repurposing content, I am more focused on, how do I give to the guest, if that makes sense? So like if I post something on LinkedIn, right? It also depends what platform. Like for you and I, like LinkedIn's an amazing platform because it's a very business oriented platform. When I think of taking a clip out and, creating an overlay or whatever it is, I'm thinking less of, I want to get a bunch of people like following me, and more of how can I prop up Pia and what she's doing. So I think of just giving to even if like 5 people see it, I am thinking of it more of not a getting more viewership, but more of how do I give to the guest, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess to your question, you could clip it up. I mean, you can clip one episode up a bunch of different ways. You can make it into part 2 of a podcast. You can clip, 3 clips that are 30 seconds. You can actually do the video. You can do I've done the text overlay with the video or text overlay with just the audio. You can take an image and put a quote on it. So there's so many ways, but I see it as a way to I don't go overkill, where for an episode I'll push it out on social media for the person. Also we'll clip it for 30 to 60 seconds, nicely clipped, and then put it on social media and tag them and tag some other people. Like my goal, Pio, when I have a podcast episode, one of my big goals is to introduce them to other amazing people that I know and to potentially get them a client, like make an introduction for them for a referral partnership or client. So people don't realize, I'm going to like get a great episode, but I've sent this out to people after the fact episodes and introduce them to referral partners or clients, and they started doing work together. So
that's great. I love that. See, now I've learned something new again. It's not focusing on how you can promote your business in the podcast, but how can you promote your guest and get them more clients, because it all comes back around, right? Same, different mindset. That's great. Are there any other tips that you can help our audience with? Just, if they're thinking about getting started, to kind of push them over the edge.
Totally. Yeah. So there's one thing, and like people are like, well, this whole podcast, listen, it doesn't have to be a podcast. Okay. Like that's the medium I love. But it could be, you could feature someone in a blog post. I'm always keep it simple, right? People ask me the technology setup, right? So you could use Zoom and a USB mic like you see here, which is like $70 to $100. But one thing I would tell people is just get started. And I tell people get started doesn't mean you have to do a podcast. The way I look at it, a podcast is one way to give to your network. Another way you can give your network, and I would encourage anyone listening, just start right now and do this. Anyone could do this, is think of in your network, write down like 2 or 3 people in your universe that you just are big champions of you, that have been helpful to you, and also their profession. And the profession is because there's maybe I did this with someone the other week, and it just was weird, Pia, that we did this exercise and it was more than a couple, but I noticed that the CPAs they kept saying, well, these, whatever, let's say there were 10 people who had referred them. There were like 5 that were CPAs. I'm like, do you see that like half these people are CPAs referring you? They're like, no, I never noticed that. So actually write down the profession of some of the people who are your biggest champions and referral partners over the past 6 months. But what I would encourage anyone to do is go on your social media channel of choice, write a paragraph about that person and saying, just profiling them and tagging them in it. And that's it. Just nothing. I mean, nothing about yourself. Just say, so-and-so is awesome. Here's their service. Here's their website. Check it out. And that's it. So you can get started profiling others without having a podcast. Everyone has, they think it's super complicated. You have a social media, just do it today. So.
Yeah. And you can only get better, right? With practice.
It's all reps. Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great insight. I honestly started it for 2 reasons, because our digital agency coach kept bugging me about it for 3 years. And I got tired of him bugging me. I'm like, fine. And B, because honestly, I'm really interested in people. I'm just fascinated how they got started and how did you start this business? And it's just paid off. I mean, it's been amazing. So
that's what it's about. P, people ask, you've done thousands of interviews. How, what are some tips? And I just say, ask questions you're curious about. Mm-hmm. And if it's interesting to you, it's going to be interesting, hopefully, to someone out there, but just ask questions you're curious about.
So I'm curious about the story of your wife giving birth in a minivan. I need to know. The public needs to know.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a crazy, and that's the other thing. So ask questions you're curious about, and then make sure the guest tells good stories. But yeah, when I introduce myself or whatever, I always like to make it not your normal professional intro. So I always have fun facts about me and funny quirks, which I'm weird. As you get to know me more, Pia, you'll know how strange it will get. The rabbit hole will get deeper with strangeness. But yeah, actually, we were our second child. We were she was laboring at home, and luckily, I'll just say we had a doula. If anyone doesn't know what a doula is, a birthing coach, and she has a bit of a disorder where your blood is a bit thinner. It's not hemophiliac. So she couldn't get a epidural. So we needed a kind of a coach to help her through the pain. So the doula comes to our house, checks her, and she's like, you're ready to have this baby right now. And so we hopped in the car. It was exactly what you see out of a movie. I ran through every stoplight. I was going like 90 miles an hour. I pulled up into the hospital, the emergency room, Circle Drive, went in to get a doctor, in which case the doula was actually in the car with us, luckily, or I would have delivered the baby.
Yeah.
I go in to get a doctor. I come out and I said, my wife's having she's laboring. She's pushing in the car. Please come out. I come out and I said, they'll be out in a second. And my wife is holding the baby. So,
oh my gosh.
While I went in and came out, the doula swung open the back door of our minivan, which was new, by the way, I'll just say, and delivered the baby by the time I went in to get a doctor and I came out. So she delivered the baby with the doula in the minivan in the Circle Drive of the emergency room.
Well, I'm glad it was successful. I mean, I feel like you need to write the maker of the minivan and say, hey, we have a story for you.
And my daughter now says, you can never sell this minivan because I was born in it. So
maybe she'll get it for college or something.
Exactly.
She'll inherit
It's still running.
So the last question I have for you is, what are some of your favorite podcasts? I'm curious because there's so many to choose from. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do when I'm researching a guest, if they've been on other podcasts, I always do research. Some of the ones that I enjoy, I listen to Jason Swank's podcast. I listen to John, my business partner's podcast, Smart Business Revolution. I listen to Jordan Harbinger's podcast, which is the Jordan Harbinger Show. I obviously listen to Mixergy's. He has some amazing guests. It depends on the mood and what type of guests and what I'm trying to learn. So I also love Audible as well, but those are some of the ones I love.
That's amazing. Yeah, you kind of get it's just like getting online and starting to open up all the tabs. It's like I could be listening to 5 different podcasts in one day. So, well, totally. Thank you for being my guest. I admire what you do. Where can people find you online? What's the best place to connect with you, Jeremy?
Yeah, you can go to rise25.com. We have an About Us page and a contact page. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm also on LinkedIn, Jeremy Weisz, and feel free to connect with me there.
Yeah, and he has a free webinar also on his website to help new podcasters. That is very helpful. Totally. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pia.